Next one up is Bhayshul Tuten, Virginia Tech running back, 5'9.25", 206 pounds, 9-inch hands. He's 22 years old. He just turned 22, so he'll be playing this whole season at that age. In the 40, he had a 4.32 and a 1.49 10-yard split. Woo, man, that is flying. 20-yard shuttle, 4.41. Kind of disappointing for that.
To have a slower.
It is very odd to have that number be higher or slower than the 40. Nothing on the 3-cone. I guess he figured
there's only like 2 guys that did the 3-cone.
The 20 yards.
It's dead. It sucks.
It really is.
It doesn't suck. It's such awesome drill.
No, it sucks that people don't do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
That's what
agreed.
Suckers.
Broad jump of 130 inches. So that's pretty
10
good.
foot 10.
10 foot 10 and a 40.5 inch vertical. Last year at Virginia Tech in 11 games, he had 183 attempts, 1,159 yards rushing, 15 touchdowns, 23 receptions, 81 yards. That does not seem right, but it is. And 2 additional touchdowns. How do you only get 81 yards on 23 catches? Unbelievable.
So, yeah, Bhayshul Tuten was somebody who absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Let me before I have the run block. I have the run before, but let me set it up with the run blocking numbers.
Run blocking numbers over there.
92nd was their run blocking grade for Virginia Tech last season.
VTech. Always like that. Such a good Virginia Tech. Go to VTech. Sounds nice.
Sounds prestigious.
Bhayshul Tuten. You're rooting to it. I had to make sure,
I had to make sure the pronunciation.
Oh, it's Tuten.
It's Tuten.
I had to look it up on YouTube.
Tuten all
obviously, I
watch
watch all 22 films, so they don't say that everybody's name. So I was like, okay, I got to make sure I watch the combine, and I missed it because I think I was able to watch as much combine as I wanted to. I had to go back and watch. But Bhayshul Tuten, I have his pronunciation around here, and he absolutely destroyed the combine. So I was real excited to get in his tape. I like Bhayshul Tuten, but I will say I was disappointed with the tape compared to how athletic he was. And
you kind of wish you'd watched him before the combine
and seeing everybody, even on Twitter, he's a big name on Twitter, right? Now that being said, even though I was disappointed, I still like Tune as a prospect. I mean, this guy, you mentioned speed, right? It's just pure, but I mean, he's a track star with the football in his hands, 4.32 speed. It's dude, I mean, you watch him against Miami. It's he's jumping around the edge. He just tapped Tyreek Hill on the hill on the head and said, goose, play duck, duck, goose. And he's gone. You know what I mean? So his hips are real loose, which is nice. Listen, plant, cut on dime. Now I thought with how athletic he was, he'd be this super athletic agility kind of guy that could shake and bake. And that's where I was really disappointed because he's not that in the slightest bit whatsoever in my eyes. He's a one-cut.
More of a straight.
Yeah, he's a one-cut north-south runner. That's what he is. Now, you could argue a guy like Chris Johnson was that way, right? Yep, Chris Johnson was a shake and baker. He's a one-cut north-south runner with 4.29 speed, and it worked out pretty well for about 2 or 3 years for Chris Johnson. Yeah, it was
fun for a bit.
Very short bit. I was disappointed because I was like, this is a very short-lived thing. And I got number 1 pick in a redraft league, high stakes one. And I was like, you know what? It's been a good run. Chris Johnson's 1-1. That's when he went bad. You're welcome. So, for me, I mean, here's the thing with him. He's a zone runner, right? He's got to be in a zone scheme. So in my eyes,
they're at Virginia Tech last year. They ran 130, or he had 137 rushes that were zone concept against only 46 that were gap. So he predominantly ran zone, and it was mostly outside zone.
So, I mean, he's got the juice, right? He's got elite speed. He plays tough, but even he it's not a knock on him. Can he catch the football? Yeah. But again, all his catches were just kind of his route. He doesn't run any routes whatsoever.
It was weird though, the only 81 yards this year, because all the other years he had 200 and 300 yards receiving. Right. So it was just kind of a weird anomaly how the year worked out.
And that was, again, we always talk about you can or can't, right? But I was watching when he did go out, his route tree was non-existent in my eyes.
Right. No, he was just going out as a safety valve and
100%.
He's your basic running back.
I thought his vision could use some work too out there. I think it was great. So again,
he did have lower marks for me, pretty average vision.
I think when you hear about Tuten and you're rooting for him to get out there and start scooting, you got to be prepared to think again, you think these super athlete people, you think they're super agile, shake and bake. That is not his game at all. I would definitely prefer Dylan Sampson over Tuten personally. With some of the other guys, like he's gonna fall more in that almost like if he's in tier 3 right now, he's on a back end of tier 3. I don't see a lot of difference between him and like some of these other guys we're gonna talk about. And that's, to be fair, kind of go back to your score where this is unbelievable. Like it almost sounds like I'm talking down about him, but his class is so good, he just falls into the middle of that class. Sure. So it's like, for me, he's
if you have him, 11th here, it would normally be 6th, but
he's gonna be really dependent on where he goes, what scheme he ends up and what kind of path he has, because he's definitely like a very hit and miss player for me. I can see him being a good fantasy player for 5 years and be very solid. And I can see him completely being a complete bust.
I think what helped him is, as much as we don't really care about the combine, NFL teams still do care about some of that kind of stuff. And he's a guy that I could have seen teetering on. Is he a day 2 guy or is he a day 3 guy? I think he's pretty firmly a day 2 guy now, where he's going to probably go into the 3rd round. And that obviously is a boost for things.
Good returner.
So this was a weird one for me because I watched him before the combine.
Okay.
And I was having a hard time because there was so much outside zone, and I was trying to figure out, is this guy fast, or is he kind of just being really patient? Like, it's sometimes hard to decipher when they're
it is.
Like
it's
that.
funny. I'll show you the text. I texted Jared. I was like, is he a 4.4 guy or a 4.3 guy?
Yep.
And I think he's a 4.3 guy, but I can't tell for sure. So it's funny that you say that, because I literally texted
So
Jared
I was having a hard time with that. In my initial notes before the combine and before he ran the 4.3, I thought initially he was going to be a 4th or 5th round draft pick, because that's what he just kind of felt like to me. But I agree with you that running a 4.3 matters. I think he can jump into that 3rd round. I don't think anyone would get crazy and get him in the 2nd round. I don't think so. I think that would be like his ceiling would be 3rd round.
Though I did see a mock Ruse on the 1st the other day.
But I think he could go 3rd. I still think he'd go 3rd to possibly 5th, because it's such a weird draft and there's so many running backs. So I still think there's a shot that he goes day 3. And for me, he is a one-cut runner. If he's not in a outside zone scheme, he does not operate well outside of that. So this is going to be a for sure. I'm going to see where he fits or what scheme he goes to and make a decision as to where he kind of lies in my rankings based off of that. Because if it is zone, that lines up perfect with what he does. If it's not, it's the difference between like him being like a 69 in my grade book to being like a 65. You know what I mean? There's a pretty big difference between him running that gap scheme and him running the outside zone.
Go a little down far south, you're kissing the wrong place.
You got a pretty mouth. So
with 65 is not too close to 69.
I ended up having a 73.5 grade on him. So he is just a tad bit below Dylan Sampson. The crazy part is, though, Dylan Sampson, 73.33, so only a 0.3 roughly difference.
And I have both those guys really close as well.
Just have them a little bit lower.
Just a little bit lower.
Okay.
So this is me still being new to this whole
process. Yeah, and we might see it slightly differently, but could mean roughly the same thing. We're just
exactly.
But
we're on the same page with Tuten. We're not on the same page with Sampson.
The funny part is, though, Dylan Sampson is running back 7. Bhayshul Tuten is running back 10. So despite being that close, they're still
miles
3
apart.
spots apart. So that just kind of shows you where this class is. And there's going to be so many of these like roughly 3rd round backs that this could vary a lot depending on how teams value certain players. Now, you mentioned the outside zone scheme. The nice part is, especially over the past 2 to 3 years, almost every team at least has that in their playbook now. Now, more teams, there are teams that run it more predominantly than others.
Right.
But the nice part is almost every team now has incorporated some elements of that into their offense. So that's the nice part is I think teams are much less, this is what I do, this is what I run, and I'm going to do it that way no matter who's on my team. And coordinators have become much more adaptable to their personnel, to their players, to their strengths than they've ever been before. And I think that's why we're seeing guys like Tuten and how I mentioned before, Sampson and all these guys.
There are teams that do it better.
There are teams, for
you know
sure.
what I mean? Like there are teams that major in it.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm looking for him to get on one of those teams.
And I think that's where the rub is too. I think that's where and I think that's how he goes day 2, like in round 3. Like a team sees us like, oh, dude, we're gonna put him in our odds on zone scheme. He's gonna be our Devon Achane. He's gonna be our home run hitter. And then that gets me a little bit more excited.
And that's how that was my comp. We talked about him. I see him a lot like I saw Devon Achane, just not quite as good. Like very similar skill set. Devon Achane is not as much of a make you miss guy. Can he do it? Some sure. Can Tuten do it? Some sure. But that's not. They're mostly just a pure speed guy that I think Achane was able to be a little more physical than I've seen out of Tuten. And I think Devon Achane's a little bit quicker. And so there's just
shiftier too.
A little bit more shiftier, a little bit better hands. Like all of his things are like, if I gave one of them a 7, I'm giving Achane a 7.5 or an 8. Like, but they have a very similar skill set to them. So if somebody's looking at Miami and saying, I think we can do some of that with our running game, Tuten would be a good guy to do that with.
So for reference, I referenced some of those 10 plus, 15 plus type of things. 34 10 plus, which was good for 22nd for Tuten here. 21 15 plus, which was good for 10th, and his yardage on those 15 plus 621, good for 8th. So he is a guy that's kind of pulling himself away. He is breaking big runs that are resulting in larger chunks than 15 yards, which is kind of what those numbers say to me. So 621.
I wonder how much of that, and this is just
Dylan was 453, just on a similar amount, 17 to 21.
I wonder how much of that is ACC defenses versus SEC defenses.
Right.
SEC, most of these guys they're playing on Sundays. ACC defenses, there's a lot fewer guys that
cherry
are
pick,
so
2 or 3 on each team.
The safeties and the linebackers and stuff like that. Like, I wonder if that's the difference in some of those types of things for him breaking, 10, 15, 20 yards versus 40, 50, 60 yards.
I mean, the 4.32 doesn't hurt.
That does not hurt.
Because I don't know Dylan Sampson's time, but I would be surprised if it was.
I know Sampson was a track guy in high school. I was listening to the Stock Exchange podcast.
Okay.
And they were talking about Sampson and Travion Henderson, because they were talking about guys in kind of a similar-ish NFL mold as to how they would profile and stuff like that. And Sampson did have a better, it was either a 100 dash or 200 dash time than Travion Henderson. Not by much, but he did have a better time.
Okay.
So Travion ran a 4.43, I believe.
Sure. Yeah.
4.32. So I'm guessing Sampson's probably somewhere in the middle there, probably a 4.38 or something like that.
Okay.